The moon shone quite brightly over Lavis Vindica, a grand construction with multiple towers. However, laid out on the floor were bodies after bodies of fallen monsters. One person remained standing, clutching the legs of a big, hulking figure that stood at the center of this massacre. The wailing man cried, asking the big man if he thought that he could get away with a massacre like this. Meanwhile, the intimidating man with blazing red eyes and a frightening stare looked down at House Hilt, asking if they really thought that he would not find out about what they had been up to. What had happened here was no massacre. This was an execution carried out by the House Vindica. Saying these final words as the other man looked at him with bitterness and hate in his eyes, the Dark Lord raised his evil claw and dispatched the poor man at once, striking him down. The final scream echoed through the land, and then there was silence as he faded away. When the lights came up once again, a different lord was fuming at the action taken by Lavis Vindica. Apparently, he found this type of behavior to be completely unacceptable, and he called the intimidating man an arrogant, foolish boy. The man in charge had ordered Lavis to find evidence of treason, not to exterminate an entire family. The wild, murder-crazy lunatic had disrupted the order of the demon realm, and he had gone way too far this time. The demon king Gamudere Vindica was the one speaking. Lavis challenged this verdict, saying that he had found evidence everywhere. The old man knew as well as he did that those hilt jerks were hopeless. It was one thing to find a rebellion, it was another to massacre an entire clan bra. He yelled that thanks to those geezers who had been clinging to House Hilt, they could not punish them even with proof. They had gotten away with so many wicked crimes, someone had to do something. As the man spoke, one of the silent onlookers seemed to be watching him very closely. Still, Lavis' father was heavily disappointed. There was a proper procedure when it came to enforcing punishment, and that procedure did not at all require his son's petty and very violent justice. The young Vindica laughed at his father's notions of procedures and enforcement. All of these were words that threatened to crack him up. The man yelled that darkness was swallowed by even deeper darkness. That was the right way to deal with things. That was supposed to be the law of survival in the demon realm. Yeah, the boy was quite hopping mad at this point. There was little hope for him. The father sighed as he stared down at his raving son, and the boy kept going, insisting that the great demon king should hear his logic. If a person could not even swallow a darkness as obvious as this, then there was no way the House Vindica could call itself the ruler of the realm. His father knew the order of the demon realm was being toyed with by the nobles. They were demons for goodness sake, ruthless monsters that lived in the pits of the deepest of abyss. The young lad did not see why they shouldn't tear through everything to solve their problem. Unfortunately, his father did not share the same mindset. In fact, the old man seemed rather dismayed by his son's painful short-sightedness. The boy was truly an incurable fool, and there was nothing to be done about that. The House Vindica could only survive if the House Hilt was destroyed. The young prince insisted on this. House Hilt was committing all those crimes in an attempt to take the throne. He believed this was why he had been sent as an investigator, instead of those cowards hiding behind House Hilt and turning a blind eye to the order. The Demon King remained silent as he regarded his ever-tenacious son, before heaving a rather heavy sigh. There was no reasoning with the young lad. The fact was that the prince believed he was right, and so it would be really hard to convince him otherwise. The 12 black seats, and the king had already decided on his son's punishment. The boy was flabbergasted. He could not believe that he was getting punished right now. Lavis Vindica, for the crime of violating demonic law and massacring the House Hilt. He would absolutely not be getting away with that, and he would be banished to the human realm. What a pathetic and horrible place for a demon. The poor guy was horrified. He shook and yelled that his dad could not be serious. He did not want to leave with those pathetic weaklings. However, the boy had to pay for his crimes somehow, and this was fairly better than banishment. His powers would be sealed in the human realm, and there he would hopefully learn the true dignity of being a Vindica. This whole situation felt like rubbish to him. The poor dude started to beg for mercy. Sure, he had killed the Hiltbrats, but he did not destroy their souls. They were only a little bit dead. However, the Demon Lord was quite done listening, and he ordered his people to execute the sentence at once. The 12 black seats got busy and started their little demonic chanting. Lots of purple magic circles took front and center, and the young demon prince yelled and screamed that he would not accept this kind of bullying. Unfortunately for him, that kind of thing was not his choice at all. Even if he kept insisting that he did nothing wrong, he was still getting tossed out and sentenced. The one who had been staring at him earlier put their hand down on his face, and the Lavis screamed in agony and possible fear as his powers got sealed away. The bespectacled weirdo told the little rogue prince to go ahead and have a wonderful time. They would take good care of things while he was gone. Now that sounded like a threat, and the prince snarled to hear it. If he were not here, he could not protect his father from whatever threat the black seats were planning. Unfortunately, it was too late to turn things back now, and the man screamed in pain as the punishment took effect. There was light in action and chains. Hereby, Lavis Vindica was sentenced to descend into the human realm. The rules that he had to follow were to live faithfully as the host of the body that he inhabited. He must not take his own life until his natural lifespan ended, and he was not allowed to kill any humans. Violation of any of these rules would result in the annihilation of his very soul. Lavis was still screaming when he finally woke in the human realm. He gasped when he pushed up to a sitting position, his body covered in sweat as he lay in bed. Slowly, his racing heart slowed, and he glanced down at the body in front of him. Fortunately for the guy, he was not starting from the baby stage, though he really hated to be here at all. The hands before him were unmistakably human. The body he was in lacked fangs or power. The boy cursed at his terrible luck, his head falling into his hands. He had really fallen somehow into the human realm, and he was sick of it. Bambi, that jerk, had been the one to betray him like this. Once he got back, he swore to find that traitorous coward and pull his horns out for treating him this way. He could not focus too much on his revenge plan though, because his body was hurting and he had no idea why. It was odd to him that human bodies hurt so much. Slowly, the boy pushed to his feet, and he stared at the pathetic body that he'd been trapped in. Naturally, he was not a fan of the situation. Those hilt punks were useless to the very end, and it was hard for him to even breathe in this awful human world. There was no sulfur flowing nearby for humans to access. Finally, someone showed up to check on the screaming buffoon. It was a lady, and she asked what on earth that sound was he had been making. She called him Appa, so she was clearly younger than he was. The boy was shocked to see her at all, but the girl was overjoyed, racing towards him and celebrating that he was finally awake. She threw herself at him, holding him tight because she had thought that he would never wake up. It seemed that she was the sibling of the body that he was possessing. The boy frowned and raised his head to see an older woman looking at him in shock and disbelief. So that was likely his mother. She called him Min Ho, and she sobbed in relief to see that he had woken up. The boy must have been in so much pain. Everyone around here was acting really dramatic about him standing up from bed. The boy had no idea what he was supposed to do in a situation like this. After all, demons did not usually cling to each other in such a way. They say that human relations were one of the 3 great hells. Dang. Bro really did not like being nice and cuddly at all. He was worried about whether or not he could survive in such a suffocating atmosphere. Suddenly, in came a man with a bit of a cold demeanor. He was not at all soft like the woman and the girl. This was likely his father. The wife happily told her husband that their cute son, Min Ho, had just woken up. The man glared like an emotionless robot, and the boy stared right back. Then, the man just told the boy to snap out of it and go to school tomorrow. A curtain, very short greeting with barely any softness or love. The boy had been in bed for a week, so he had a lot of schoolwork to catch up on. The real Minho would probably have been depressed if his father greeted him like this. The mother was worried about the child's condition. After all, he had just woken up, but the father really couldn't care less about the situation. The boy was awake, and that was enough. The newly awakened human could not stop staring in awe at the way his father treated him, even as his sitter nervous asked if he was okay. The dark aura from that man had been such a wonderfully pleasant surprise, and the boy beamed with joy. Now that was the kind of attitude he was used to in the demon realm. He definitely liked a cold and calculated person like that very much. He had not realized that even some humans could act like demons. That was such a delight to discover. While the dude was gushing over his father, his sister was very confused. Then Lavis caught himself. He did not want to be caught dead liking anything from the human realm. He needed to be careful until he got his body's memories back. That was a wise move, because the boy could tell that there were a few things that he probably should know about his family, just as his father had demanded. The next day, the young man found himself in a school. They did not really have this kind of thing in the demon world, but his mother dropped him off and told him to call if he felt sick during class. The boy said that he would and trudged forward while the woman watched with worry. The young lad had already graduated from school a good 600 years ago in the demon realm. Having to share this mundane exercise with humans was hardly going to be a delightful experience, and he cursed the fact that he had been sent back at an age to go to school. This really was hell. Human relationships were hell, and even in the classroom, the boy remembered that humans did not live for 100 years. He figured that he would just stay quiet and avoid soul annihilation while he was here. It would be too unfortunate if he were to accidentally kill a human just because one of them got him upset. The man had already bought some time for his dear old dad when he had taken the opportunity to annihilate the house hilt. So, he just needed to return to the demon realm and take his father's throne before the Vindica royalty was put in danger again. As he was thinking, 2 boys walked into class, surprised to see Min Ho back in school. The boy glanced back and wondered what was happening now. The new dude smirked and asked the kid if he had brought the late fees for the time that he was gone. The new pale-haired guy grabbed our dude's shoulder in a not-so-friendly way and began to squeeze rather threateningly. The boy groaned and then realized with horror that his body was cowering on its own. This was the highest level of disgrace, not only being scared of a couple of weak teenagers, but weak teenage human. Now that the flashbacks were coming in, the boy realized that these 2 goofballs had apparently been bullying him a lot. They had smirked wickedly at him, and they had tormented this body like it was their living punching bag. Back then, the only thing the owner of this body could do was cry helplessly. The flashback was over, and the young demon prince now understood the reason why his whole body ached. The good news was that he was not suffering from early body deterioration. The bad news was the punks who were hell-bent on bullying him and mocking him for being scared of them. They laughed that the boy had gotten even more pathetic, and they wanted to give him a proper welcome. Not only did they take joy in beating him up for fun, but they were apparently also taking money from him. The young demon prince could not believe it. He was totally getting bullied right now by a couple of punks. He recalled when he was younger at school, and the teacher had shown the image of a human. Everyone was so disgusted by their hornless and vulgar appearances. The demoness teaching them had smirked, saying that humans were definitely infinitely vulgar beings who would do anything to hide their own weakness. Moreover, they were foolish creatures who worshipped both demons and angels. Back then, Lavis had scoffed that they should just burn those pathetic humans away. Even the teacher agreed with such a statement. If they ever encountered a human, crushing their vulgarity into dust was definitely the best course of action, and she happily tortured the demons dancing on her palm. A mere human now dared to bully him, heir to the Demon King's throne. Lavis could not believe this insufferable insult from a weak loser. Meanwhile, the bully was chilling. After all, messing with people was his daily routine. He had no idea that he was about to get the shock of his life. Suddenly, a hand fisted in his hair, much to the boy's surprise, and the boy's face got slammed right into the desk. Without wasting any time, the young demon prince moved straight to his revenge to punish the fools who would dare to touch him. Now the second bully was absolutely shocked, and he rushed forward to defend his friend. Lavis was surprised to see his magic react to the boy's movement. If his magic was still working, then that means that he could defend himself at least against these weak creatures. The bullies were yelling and asking if he had lost his mind after almost dying. Perhaps he had. They should be more careful when choosing who to bully if they do not want to suffer from nearly dying as well. Punk number 2 threw a violent punch, but our guy was able to dodge that flawlessly. It seemed that human insults were a great stimulant for his magic, so there was a link between profanity and magic. That was a fairly new one. But Lavis was not about to complain, and he whacked that fool with all that he had. He hit that bully so hard that the jerk went flying into the locker. Now, all the students were shocked and terrified at this development. The class punching bag that none of them had bothered to defend ever was rocking his bullies. The boy's magic should be sealed away in the human realm, but it seemed even in a human body, his magic was reacting to malice. Oh, this was too good to be true. Someone called out to Minho, unable to recognize him at all. The first bully stood up, and he grabbed a chair with the intention of payback. The bespectacled kid called out to his friend, yelling for him to watch out. The boy turned so fast enough to land a very well-deserved kick right into that idiot's gut and send him flying. The first bully stumbled, wheezing from sheer shock and discombobulation. He could not believe his victim was turning the tables so violently. The bully called him weak, but he was not looking very convincing, considering he was on the floor and clutching his belly like a loser. The boy commented that humans often get more vulgar to hide their weakness. He asked if cursing like that made the bully feel strong. However, Lavis did not mind, and he wound up his foot to give a sure kick to the back of that idiot's jaw, sending him flying for real this time. The source of human profanity was his mother herself, so all these idiots were doing was just making him stronger. Now the class was abuzz because Min Ho had beaten Tae Woo and Song Jun. Meanwhile, this whole exchange was wonderful news to Lavis, so all he had to do was stay quiet and not kill anyone until his time was over. Now that was perfect, and the boy smiled wickedly. He asked if there was anyone else who wanted to curse at him with the most demonic smile on his face. In fact, Lavis was excited to find out if anyone else wanted to swear at him. The other students could not believe that this was really Min Ho. The boy standing before them was barely recognizable. Suddenly, that weak, pathetic boy who had been bullied to the underworld and back was standing before them, strong and maybe a little bit crazy. The boy with the glasses stepped forward hesitantly to ask the other boy if he was okay. The dark-haired boy smiled, noting the bespectacled boy as someone who had tried to help him earlier, though with minimal effort. He looked perfect to use as his attendant. Unfortunately, the main character was still knee-deep in demon logic, and he smiled down at the other kid, saying that he was fine. Hours later, people could not stop talking about the amazing feat that Min Ho had pulled off. He had taken on those bullies all by himself. That was amazing, and the little nerd asked if the boy had somehow reincarnated into another world or something. The demon prince was shocked that he had been found out so quickly. The little nerd asked with excitement if he had reincarnated from a martial world. That was the kind of thing that usually happened in comics like this, or if the boy had come back from a journey inside a game. Meanwhile, Lavis was thinking that this attendant had already noticed his true identity. Back in the demon realm, he had been warned against killing humans, as that would result in true soul annihilation. The demon prince had scoffed back then, pointing out that their teacher had encouraged them to crush vulgar humans. His friend Bambi had said that was just something that was said offhand. They really could not treat human death so lightly, apparently. They were gods who governed death. Just like the angels protected their flock, they had to look after their own set of devoted believers. However, the boy pointed out that humans were always trying to kill each other. Yeah, Well, those tiny beings were foolish, and that was precisely why the demons existed. Lavis did not really get it, but Bambi wanted him to remember this. Killing a human would lead to soul annihilation, and this mattered greatly. The man scoffed that he was a demon god, so he would likely never go to the human realm. Funny how life worked. And now he was stuck in that stupid realm trying to decide how to handle the matter of the squirt, who knew his identity. He was not familiar with Isekai, so he had no idea that was what the little nerd was talking about. If he couldn't kill humans, he wondered how to silence them. However, the little nerd seemed to be doing that fine himself, and he sighed that it would be really nice if reincarnation really existed. He really wished that he could wake up in another world. Lavis could smell desperate suffering coming from his little friend. The nerd admitted that reincarnation and stuff like that were just nonsense, and he knew better than anyone how much the boy had endured before he had snapped. It seemed the little human had not realized the truth after all, but he still smiled with pride at his friend who had fought so amazingly earlier. Honesty, the little nerd was proud. Somehow, praise worked in the opposite way for Lavis, who was horrified to be praised by a mere human. All he had done was throw a few bullies around. It was nothing compared to his true strength. Later that night, the boy considered his current situation. When humans cursed him, his demonic power definitely activated. A demon imprisoned in a human body should not be able to use magic. He stared at his hand and wondered how his father could have made such an error. The whole situation was suspicious. Then he happily chalked it up to his almighty power that had no limits. The boy was thrilled. He was in the middle of celebrating when sudden pain shot through his arm, and he clutched it in agony. It was still dark outside, but the boy was writhing in pain. Despite being so advanced, he groaned at the fact that his body was just far too weak to handle his own power. His whole body hurt. He had only lived as a human for one day, but things already felt quite miserable. If his body hurt this much from exercising just a little bit of his power, the boy wondered how on earth he was going to get any darn sleep. Eventually, he did fall asleep, and the dark sky outside slowly brightened to the light of the morning sky. The sun rose over the school, and it was back to learning in the human academy. It had been forever since they had a normal day at school without those bullies hounding them for their money. Thanks to Minho, nobody was messing with them. The boy scoffed that he would rather just beat up anyone who dared. Honestly, his attitude was way too different from the original owner of that body. Lavis did not care though, he just wanted to test out his awesome power. Someone then called for Jong Minho. The boy slowly turned, and of course, the bullies had shown up with backup. Geez, those guys could never let things go. Apparently, the bully had told his big brother that some punk had packed him up at school. The bully laughed that he had been protecting these people this whole time, and this was how they repaid the favor. Minho smiled to see this new gathering of goons. What a wonderful present the bully had brought. In fact, the boy was practically beaming to hear another insult getting hurled at him. He reacted so happily to an insult rather than praise. The bullies asked him to follow them, and he happily obeyed. Much to the horror of his nerd friend, Tiwu got scolded for going around and getting beaten up, and he also got his ass kicked by a weakling as well. The boy apologized to his Hoang, but now it was time for revenge. Jong Minho was just standing there with his pretty eyelashes, and the big brother smirked, saying that he could not just let the kid go. He needed to teach him a lesson. He poked the young boy and asked if this was what his mom had taught him, to beat up good kids. The young boy smiled a rather dangerous smirk as he informed them that this was exactly what his mom had taught him to do. The big brother laughed in offense, calling our dude a punk. Now he really wanted to teach him a lesson. That boy's hand went up, aiming right for the main character's face. The sharpest curses were the ones that reminded him of his mother. They were really the sweetest. That hand never made contact with Minho's face. In fact, his grip tightened on that audacious arm, watching in mad glee as his new victim struggled in his hold. Oh, his almighty mother, who gifted poison to the tongues of humans, was his greatest joy. With absolute excitement, the boy threw his hands with all of his might, knocking down the wicked one who tried to oppress him. Violence only binds the flesh, but they said a rotting voice gnaws at the soul. These pitiful beings were desperately calling out to his mother, and the other bullies watched in horror as that dude got pounded into the pavement. The big brother was getting beaten badly, and he yelled for his backup to actually be useful in his life and back him up. They're bad, they thought that he got this. Now, they were going to sink to the pathetic low of coming after him as a group. Truly, humans were pitiful creatures, but this worked well for our dude as well. Against great evil, greater power gathered. As all those pathetic rats raced at him, the boy worked hard to beat them back and forth. His eyes shone a brilliant red, and he gave those bullies the kind of beating that would rest their moral compass. It was so shocking that even his nerd friend got terrified just witnessing it. By the time he was done putting his hands on everyone, our dude had to flex his fingers for a second and take a deep breath. All the pathetic weaklings lay at his feet, coughing and gasping in dismay, and the boy spread his arms like this sort of agony was what brought him true joy. It was so refreshing. His uncle had granted violence to humans when his mother created curses. Violence was really the best. Now he understood why that power had been given to humans too. Truly, the best for any type of communication was violence. Basking in the overflowing ray of his uncle's gift, the young prince expressed his joyous gratitude. Now that all the Class bullies had been taken care of. Our dude recalled that his nerd friend was still in the area. The boy Minho smiled with joy, but there seemed to be a pair of demonic eyes watching him. It was a little spying rat, literally a rat. As they could see, the task that had been ordered had been carried out properly. The uncle smiled as he looked down at his adorable nephew Lavis. It seemed like the young kid really liked his uncle gift. Lavis sure had a really loving family. A demon bloodstone had been embedded in his eye instead of the taboo stone. Bambi had made sure of that. Now, they wanted to see just how long this boy would be able to endure without killing someone and eternally damning his soul. There was a lot of demonic laughter echoing from the Vindica family castle. Lavis was not exactly the most loved person in his family, especially after the stunt that he pulled with wiping out the entire Hilga family. The demon prince was known for always getting his way, and no one was crazy about this. There were a few who could rein in that stubborn brat. Still, tossing him into the human realm without a second thought was really something. Gamodare really showed no mercy. To deal with a vicious high-ranking one, only subjugation by force would work. That was the creed of the Lord Gamudare, the great demon king. The human realm was where even the demon world sent its worst criminal. It was kind of crazy that a life of weak mediocrity was peak punishment for demon kind. Lavis would likely not adapt easily at all. That tiny brat had grown up so fast, and now he was causing so much trouble. The uncle remembered fondly how he used to bully the heck out of him. The assistant Bambi asked if this was why the uncle had gifted that brat a demon bloodstone. Suddenly, a new attendant came in with the announcement that the preparation to manifest the sinner sent to the human realm was complete. The demon grinned. He wanted to see them at once. The demon obeyed the command and worked his magic over the bowl before him. Since Lavis descended to the human realm, the boy had long departed from the land of all things wicked and sinful. He would inevitably come face to face with a group of rather devious individuals. Dark magic was summoned by the Lord Barca and transferred to the bowl that Bambi was currently working on. The magic boiled and rolled together, churning and spasming in Banca's hand. He was very excited for his nephew, and he wanted to show him true darkness because this was how demons showed love. Later that day, someone had to ask Minho what on earth had happened. Even Taewo Hyung had gone down so easily. The nerd was excited and happily cheered for his friend, saying that it felt like he had been watching a movie or something like that. The main character just laughed as he tried out this dish called Hellfire, scoffing that it was nothing special while his eyes clearly watered. He said that this was just sweat coming out of his eyes. The nerd boy sighed, saying that he had told his friend to order the level of spicy food for beginners. But to the boy, a demon who avoided anything called hell was clearly not a demon at all. Suddenly a phone rang and the nerd froze when he realized the one calling him was Jin Jae-hee. The main character asked why his little minion was not picking up his phone. The boy had just gotten an urgent call, and he stuttered as he relayed this message, standing up and telling his friend to just focus on enjoying his food. With shaking hands, the boy stepped out of the food area, and the black-haired main character watched his minion with suspicion in his eyes. Later that evening, in what looked like an abandoned shed, there was a sharp tool hard at work. It seemed to be a little tattoo parlor, and a lady told her client not to move, or they would get hurt. They should have hurried up to pay their debt on time, and they ended up working an extra hour just because of that person. Then the lady smiled and stepped back to admire the fine work that she had done. Her victim looked passed out and delicious with various odd markings on his head. It seemed that she had signed her name on his head or something, and she giggled that it worked so nicely because he had such great skin. Then, a voice called out to Miss Jae-hee, telling her that they had brought the person that she was looking for. The lady turned, a femme fatale, and she smiled down at the trembling little boy before her. The lady smirked, asking her little visitor why he had come so late. His name was Cyan, and he was the main character's nerd friend. She wanted him to come a little closer. There was something that he had to see. Naturally, the boy was a little hesitant about this, but he did come, and soon he fell into the trap of her unforgiving grasp. The lady held his face in a vice grip, telling the boy to open his eyes wide and look carefully. He showed the boy the work that she had just finished on the other man, who was lying delirious on the table, asking the kid what he thought this meant. The little markings that she had made on that man's head spelt "do" in, which meant thief. He was a lowlife who could not pay his debt, so she'd had to punish him. It would be really unfortunate if she had to do the same to the cute little boy in her grasp after all. The boy trembled as the dangerous lady asked how his story was going to turn out. Lim Shan had a promise with her, and she asked how that was coming along. The boy shook as he struggled to say something, and he mumbled that he kept getting bugs, but instantly, his glasses were slapped right off his face. Her work was no joke, so she'd prefer it if he would take the situation a bit more serious. She wondered why he was so damn slow that he could not get it. The boy screamed in fear when she grabbed his arm and prepared to tattoo a mark right on his sensitive child skin. She asked if she would have to carve her instructions onto the back of his hand just so that he could understand. The boy panicked and begged her not to. So, Lim Shan was told to listen very carefully. This was going to be the last chance that she would give him, so he had to do exactly as she told him to do. He had to make sure that everything was ready, too, or the punishment would be severe. The poor child cried, But as soon as he was back home, he got back to work. He struggled as he typed at the computer, but he knew that if he did not do this, he would be in big trouble. The poor coward gripped his hand, body trembling in the wake of just thinking of what that evil lady would do to him if he did not obey. It was late at night, but the boy worked hard anyway. Meanwhile, our dude was going through the worst of pains, and he rolled and groaned at the aching in his stomach. It seemed every time he achieved a win, he would endure some sort of mind-numbing pain at night. It made it so hard to get any good rest doing nonsense like this. Though this punishment felt like it came from indulging in spicy food, his stomach burned, and his whole body felt like it was falling apart. He had only forgotten a little, but it felt like his shoulder was about to pop out. He was getting a double whammy beatdown from both the food and the fighting, the two evil F. This weak, pathetic body was the bane of his existence, and he tossed his shirt in rage. Lavis Vindica would not fall to something as pathetic as bodily pain just from exercising his devil-given might. Immediately, the boy dropped to doing intense push-up, raising and lifting himself from the floor to build his arm muscles. He would rehabilitate this trash body no matter what and reclaim his all-powerful nature from the depths of despair. No pain would ever make him submit ever again, and he screamed with all of the strength that he had. The bright morning sky came in, and everything sparkled and shone under the sun. The young lad San looked at the little device that he carried, the dangerous app that he seemed to have formulated. It was a terrifying thing made at the request of a very terrifying woman. She had instructed him to make sure that everything was ready, and the boy curled his hands into a fist. He did not want to be responsible for something like this, but he had no idea what to do and how to keep living a normal life when a crazy witch was after him. Suddenly, someone grabbed his shoulder, and the poor boy screamed. Of course, it was Minnow, his friend, or his master. The way Lavis saw it, the jaw-droppingly beautiful teenager asked why his friend was acting so startled in the middle of the day. That kind of behavior was annoying to him. The little nerd stared at his friend in shock, and then wondered if he could possibly count on Minho. His friend had suddenly become tough after all. It was worth a shot. However, like a good Samaritan, the boy bit down the idea. Even Minho would be in danger if he got involved with Jin Jae-hee. She was a mad woman that terrified even the strongest of men. He did not want the lady to hurt Minho, too. Meanwhile, the young demon prince turned in shock as he was hit with a nostalgic smell. He had scented it before, a scent that was familiar from his past life. As he was just thinking this, a girl who had been passing by suddenly crashed to the floor beside him. Apparently, her name was Sunji. Sion immediately rushed to help her, asking if she was okay and telling her to get herself together. He even shook her and asked if she was hurt somewhere. The girl looked like an actual mess. She was drooling, and her eyes were rolled back. She looked like she was deep on the worst kind of high illegal substance that ever existed. It was troubling to see her like this, and the little nerd jumped back in fear. Now that the young lad stared at her, he recalled that what he scented was demonic energy. There was no reason for demonic energy to be alive and active inside a human. Teachers rushed onto the scene while the main character was still pondering the situation, and they carried the poor girl, telling her to hang in there as they took her to the infirmary. As she was whisked away, the demonic teenager noticed something else that was odd. The girl had a demonic magic circle carved on her arm for some reason. It was the crest and symbol of the Hilka family, the family that he had worked so hard to wipe out. So those lousy demons were going to keep bothering his life even while he was getting punished. Of course, our dude had no intention of tolerating their nonsense. He had no idea why that crest was on a human body, but he was about to find out. Later that evening, someone approached. The security was alarmed to see the hooded figure and told that person to pause. She asked if this strange visitor was Sunji's friend. Even if he was a friend, he could not go in as she needed to eat right now, and they were not taking any visitors. However, the boy turned to the security lady and immediately hit her with some almighty oblivion. The woman's eyes lit up in shock and demonic energy took hold of her mind. The poor lady returned to her seat, abandoning her duty, which allowed our dude to go in uninterrupted. Even with such faint demonic power, he was impressed that he could still use this kind of ability. It would be temporary, though, so he needed to hurry this meeting up pronto. Once he was inside, he found the student sitting up and glaring at him. She asked who he was, and he redirected that question because who on earth was she supposed to be? No human should have a demonic mark. The girl immediately tried to get snippy with him, asking what was wrong with him and why he was suddenly barging into her room. However, he grabbed her hand, and she yelled that it hurt. He did not care. He needed to know why a human would be carrying a symbol of a demonic family. The girl yelled and asked what on earth he was talking about. She was not being forthcoming with answers, so he threatened her. If she did not want to suffer even worse consequences, then she would hurry up and answer his question with all the honesty in the world. He demanded that she reveal her true identity. The girl trembled when she activated his demonic eyes, and she found herself at a loss for words when faced with the might of his grand demonic power. The poor girl was face to face with a demon. She was not having a great time at all. A dark, demonic aura pulsing with every evil power known to man was hardly the kind of image that any normal high school girl wanted to see after a breakdown in the middle of the halls. She was horrified to see a demon, shaking with fear as she desperately tried to explain. The situation was very easy and the boy growled at her to spit it out. This poor girl was not having a very good time, but she would try her best to explain. Really and truly, she did not know anything about why she had collapsed that afternoon. Jae-hee had told her that he had to get this tattoo if she wanted to join their crew, which was why she had it in the first place. He had also said that he would give her some diet pills too. It seemed that the scary woman who had been haunting Xion was actually a dude. The faint scent coming from the trembling girl was definitely demonic, and he recognized it as a scent that he had smelt from the demon realm. It seemed this young girl was telling the truth. He remembered a time when he had ventured down the path of a very deep and long spiral staircase. Bambi had been there, they had both been younger back then, and his favorite demonic blonde sidekick had complained that they were going into a restricted area. Lavis had just shrugged at him and smirked, calling his blonde friend a coward. Of course, his friend got annoyed by the insult and yelled that he was not scared, he was just not crazy about getting punished because of the rebellious prince's antic. If he was so bothered about it, Lavis told him to just leave, but the blonde was not going to leave either. It seemed the boy had a thing for nerds with glasses. His resident demonic nerd had worried that the prince would get into some serious trouble if he left him alone. Still, the kid was a little worried, and he wondered just how far they were going. They ventured deeper and deeper into the underground, reaching a very dark and wide, menacing-looking door. As they looked around, the blonde saw it as an opportunity to drop some neat fun facts. First, he asked if Lavis knew that being in the dark reminded him of a story. Of course, the prince was not aware of the story he had in mind, but he was all ears. So Bambi began his narration. It was about those who possessed eyes that transcended their species. From what he knew, there were two ways they lost their sight. The fight way was that the light was too bright, so it would blind them, or creatures that saw nothing at all and their eyes had atrophy. In a dark place like this, it would not be out of place to find creatures like that. The prince suddenly shushed him, hiding behind a nearby door. He whispered to his tan friend that something was here. He could hear the sound echoing through this odd chamber that they had snuck into, a sound that did not come from any creature that they were very familiar with. Lying on the ground seemed to be a body with a flower blooming out of the palm of a hand. The little blonde demon was frightened and wondered what they were looking at. Lavis wondered that too, so he decided to take a closer look. No matter how dangerous things looked, curiosity always won when it came to the prince of the demon realm. Soon, they were up close and personal with that fancy feathered flower. As they stared, they realized that the flower was not blooming from only just the person's hand. This body was covered with flowers. Even worse, they recognized who they were staring at. It was the body of Jeremy Hilke. Looking at the state of the poor guy, he was clearly already dead. His lips had become charred and dry with flowers blossoming where his eyes should be. The strangest thing about this scene was definitely the flowers that seemed happy and healthy. Without even thinking about any form of self-preservation, the young dark-haired demon yanked the flower right out of the boy's clothes. However, as he pulled it out, it came out with a lot of blood-red roots with sharp edges like a hungry mouth devouring all that it touched. The smell was nasty too, and the prince groaned while his friend panicked. However, this situation was something that clicked in his nerdy mind. This was the knowing flower. Yeah, now Lavis could remember where he had experienced such an offensive scent, and this girl in the hospital was carrying the same scent as the gnawing glower. The poor girl sobbed, asking for the boy to spare her, and he fell silent as he stared at the pathetic, chugging idiot. Looking out the window, he could see a nice gathering of bats outside, and those creatures were definitely watching him. It seemed someone in the human realm had been expecting his presence, and they chucked at finally meeting him. Later that night, in a fairly abandoned area, a hooded figure casually walked around with his hands in his pocket. Pretty soon, he had found the Jin Jae-hee tattoo shop. The Hilke crest and the gnawing flower were two signs that he could not ignore after he had put in all of this effort to wipe out that evil family. In fact, it was all so shady that the boy could not believe that any of this was a conversation. Meanwhile, some goons were just standing around and waiting near the exit area. They sighed greatly, wondering why their bro Youngmoo was so obsessed with that high school brat. However, their bro did not want the brat, just the app that the brat had made. One of the goons laughed, asking if they were going to be doing high-tech jobs now. Some of the other goons could not focus on his words because they realized that the idiot was playing around with the blue ribbon substance. Youngmoo had only developed that one recently. The other goons warned the guy to go easy on that stuff because they had already heard about what happened to Ju Sangai. The other idiot laughed that it was brand new, so the side effects were gnarly. At any rate, the idiot goon did not really care as long as the drug felt good. They were laughing and having a good time when the hooded figure suddenly showed up in the lobby. Just a glance at them and Lavis could see that those goons had the same mark on their necks. They had the same scent and the Hilke crest. This whole situation was just oozing with the scent of bad news. He stepped up, asked the group of idiots if they had gotten those tattoos from this Jin Jae-hee person. These goons, of course, smirked, wondering who was asking. They asked if this dude was a friend of Jae-hee, and he should show some respect. Those disgusting human hands dared to cradle his face. That was not going to end well. Immediately, that hand got slapped away. The little rat had a lot of audacity to touch the prince so casually. Lavis was not having it. Immediately, he decked that guy so hard that he was seeing stars. Seeing this kind of action, of course, the other goons were bewildered. Their blonde buddy hit the ground like a stone and they had to jump in immediately. They asked who had sent this new and terrifying brawler, suspecting that he came from a rival gang. Unfortunately for them, our dude was the type who liked to work solo, and he did not answer questions from people he thought of as beneath him. A punch came flying in, and it knocked out that dude so fast that he went reeling. At this point, the goons were just standing around and watching each other drop like flies and dominoes. One of them got a little brave and swore at our dude, racing for him and telling him that he was dead meat. That guy threw a punch, probably the only member of the team to succeed in doing something like that. Of course, it did not make contact, but the main character's punch definitely did, and it landed square in that guy's face. The more profanity and rage they threw at him, the stronger he became. The last guy was going for a little cheat skill, and he pulled out a knife. It was rude to bring a knife to a fist fight, Yano, but Lavis did not mind. Within seconds, he had knocked down that fool before the knife even made contact with his skin. That idiot went flying, but Pretty Boy stayed cool and fresh, asking the question that he most wanted the answer to. He needed to know where Jin Jae-hee was. Suddenly, someone pulled up. Oh yeah, it was that blonde who had taken the mysterious blue substance from before. He was spouting some demonic stuff about murder, and he looked drooling and possessed. The boy's eyes widened in shock, wondering how this guy's demonic energy had suddenly spiked so much. The goon looked rabid, like he contained some sort of supernatural, contagious disease. Obviously, the main character was not crazy about coming in contact with such a rabid dog. The goon's movements had also changed, and it seemed like the drug that he had taken was enhancing his physical abilities. The Prince of Hell braced to fight but accidentally tripped on some of the stupid fallen bodies around him. That was an annoying mistake because that stupid goon was almost on top of him. Now, Lavis had to move carefully because he knew the penalty for killing a human. No matter how threatened he felt, he had to make a very calculated move against the attacker, who looked like he wanted to murder him. Meanwhile, inside the hideout, someone was talking about that fancy app that was still being made. Jae-hee apologized for the situation, but they made it really clear this time, so it would not be long. The lead guy groaned and said that he felt like he had heard the same excuse last time. No one liked enduring repeated mistakes, especially not the boss of an underworld gang. Also, they had caught the one who was skimming the blue ribbon supply. They had the poor guy bound and trembling before them, shaking like a leaf. The poor dude yelled that he had made a mistake, begging them to spare him. He begged for one more chance and said that he would not mess up again. However, the eerie red-haired leader of the gang did not look interested in that kind of weak plea. Instead, he looked at the blue flowers in front of him and pulled them out of the pot that held them. The poor scapegoat trembled. It looked like he knew exactly what was coming next. The dude begged for his boss to have mercy, and he screamed wildly the closer those flowers came. It was definitely sick and twisted to create a death method where people were terrified of flowers, but that hand came down, and the flowers were stuffed into that poor dude's eye. He choked and trembled, and even the pretty tattoo artist watching looked uncomfortable to see everything that was going down. The dude begged for someone to save him, but there was no helping him. The next bouquet went up, and it came down with a flourish aimed directly for his eyes. The blood and gory scene was enough to frighten anyone, and the man screamed in pain before finally falling to the floor with the flowers embedded in his eyes. The man shook as he slowly died, and the redhead was nonchalant after the execution. He was not the kind to give second chances, and he trusted that everyone here understood that much. They were beyond terrified, but they did understand. The man asked again if everyone understood, his emphasis on the tattoo artist, who still had not delivered that app. The dark red, demonic-looking person asked if Jae-hee had understood what he was saying. They needed to stop making excuses, he just wanted them to bring that app to him. This was understood, of course. The night continued and Jae-hee was panicked, worried that he would be the next one to die at this rate. He called Lim Xian over and over again, growling for that kid to hurry and pick up the phone. The phone was indeed ringing in Sound's house, and the kid stared in fear because he knew who was calling. Shakily, he answered the call. Amazingly, the call he had picked belonged to Minho. The boy explained that he was going to look into the situation himself, but all the kids he had found in the area were not answering his question. That was kind of hard for them to do, considering he had beaten them up to a pulp. At any rate, the resident demon prince needed some help, so he had called his best friend San to ask if he knew Jin Jae-hee. Minho? No, actually, Lavis was looking for that guy. Minho already knew that Cyan had picked up Jin Jae-hee's phone call back then. The young nerd was absolutely shocked at the turn that this line of questioning had taken. He had no idea how the dark-haired boy even knew about his involvement with that person. The flames of the spicy food might have temporarily consumed the main character, but he had not been blind, and he'd seen the name that came on the screen when his friend had taken that call. So, he wanted to know where the suspicious tattoo artist lived. Still, the nerd was worrying, asking how Minho even knew about Jae-hee and worried that some goons had gotten to him. It was actually the other way around, and our dude had been the one to get to the goons. That was also besides the point. He was the one who had come looking for that rotten jerk because he needed to verify something right now. He was currently at that dude's tattoo shop, but he could not find the boy that he was looking for. There was silence at the other end of the phone, and the main character paused when he spotted an adorable white kitty on the stairs. The nerd was already getting dressed and running outside, yelling that Minho should absolutely not get involved with such a terrifying guy. Cyan was coming to meet up with his friend right away. That sounded like a really annoying process, but the boy paused the call to stare at the cute cat that was now playing around with a bell. Since that call was a dead end, our dude just transferred his attention to the latest target, who happened to be the cat sweating buckets before him. He called out to the furball, grabbing it by the scruff of its neck as it sweat out buckets. There was something suspicious about that cat, and the demon prince suspected that it could understand every word that he was saying. If that were the case, then this investigation would be a tad easier. He then commanded the poor kitten to make sure that it could be understood, because the dark-haired demon had questions, and he was getting answers one way or another. The poor cat immediately responded with an affirmative in a language that the boy could understand. Good, so they were finally making some progress around here. Last time it was a rat, then a bat, and now a cat. Minho had already suspected that there was something watching him, and he demanded to know exactly what this creature was. The poor thing was a little nervous, but it admitted that it was a monitor from the demon realm sent to the human world. Its simple mission was just to keep an eye on prisoners without being noticed, that was all. Clearly, it failed terribly at the not being noticed part, but that was the only reason that it had been watching over the Lord Lavis is all. The boy narrowed his eyes at the pathetic creature before him, wondering why its demonic energy was so weak and pathetic. Honestly, he was finding it hard to believe that the creature was a demon at all. However, the little creature admitted that it did not know how the Lord had managed to notice him. A white cat in the middle of an alley like this stood out way too much. Plus, the stupid thing was standing on 2 legs right now. If it were going to spy as an animal in the human world, it should at least know how those animals behave. At this point, there was no need to ask the silly thing any more questions. Our boy had gotten the answers that he needed. Then, the prince made a new request and tried to summon the master of this creature, beckoning the master to show themselves. The creature stared in awe as the demonic power took over its body. Meanwhile, back in the demonic world, our dude's favorite blonde nerd was busy at work, and he smirked when he realized that he had been found out faster than he had expected. It was no surprise since this was the prince after all. The blonde smirked and greeted Lavis, who had figured out the situation. Yeah, the prince had figured it out, and he cursed at Bambi too for doing all this. The friend chuckled that his prince was just way too cold to him sometimes. The dark-haired boy was cautious, asking what his blonde friend was plotting this time. The blonde laughed that he had done nothing of the sort. Trying to go down this path of questioning with Bambi would just send him spiraling. Our dude knew this much by now, and he sighed and told his friend to forget it. Instead, he was going to ask way more important questions. It seemed that things were different from what he remembered, and a prisoner was not supposed to normally use demonic power in the human realm. His friend just hummed that there were often exceptions to every rule. The prince would figure out what was going on soon enough. Then he asked if the Royal Highness wanted to know anything else. So, Lavis asked about the devouring flower. That scent was strong in this world, and that was not supposed to be. His blonde friend was familiar with the scent since they had discovered it at the same time. It was a flower that was forbidden even in the demon realm, yet he could sense it in the human realm. That made no sense to him. The blonde hummed that the demon realm administration already knew that the Hilt family's reach had spread to the human world. They were persistent troublemakers, so they could not exactly say that they were completely wiped out. This got Lavis heated immediately. He had wiped out the entire Hilt family, yet the Hilt family was still causing trouble even in the human realm. It seemed that they had some remaining forces in this world. Bambi laughed because he could neither confirm nor deny any claim, but the human realm was not what it used to be. It was now a playground for all sorts of conspiracy. In fact, this current situation worked perfectly fine for their agenda. Since the prince was already there, he could go ahead and clean up all the troublesome things that existed on Earth, too. The prince frowned and wondered what on earth his friend was talking about. He demanded to know what else was going on over here. But it was not like the blonde was very forthcoming when it came to certain information. The cat was right back to meowing, and Lavis glared at it in rage, the poor thing taking the full brunt of the prince's displeasure. The prince cursed, but at least he had gotten some useful information for now. Meanwhile, Jae-hee was busy panicking a lot because he could not understand why his special app developer was not picking up the phone. He kept calling him over and over again. Time was of the essence right now. That jerk Lim Xian had surely lost his mind. He kept trying to make the phone work in between breaks of yelling at the device, growling that Lim Xian was definitely dead meat. Jae-hee called someone to help him take care of the issue, shouting at Song Jun to come to the office immediately. They were going to catch that runaway rat Lim Xian. It was still evening, and the priest had not given up on digging out as much information as he could. Now he was interrogating the monitor. He figured that a monitor must know a lot about the human world information, and the cat agreed that it had to visit the prisoners in rotation. It received regular updates on basic information and its detection abilities were also fairly decent. In that case, The prince would much prefer to talk to the creature in its original form. Since he now knew what it was ridiculous to keep talking to a cat. The cat was surprised by the request, but the prince had no intention of asking twice. He expected immediate compliance, or he would be dragging that poor creature from its fake form with his bare hands. Of course, the terrified creature agreed immediately. With a focus of power that was the bright light of transformation, the little cat turned into a rather pretty demon girl. She manifested with a bright smile on her face, beaming with joy, before our dude. Now that the protagonist got a proper look at her, he scoffed internally because she looked painfully weak. Still, Bambi must have had a reason for sending her. Then, he asked what her name was, and the girl nervously admitted that she did not have one. She was just a monitoring spirit after all, a tool that existed to be used. In that case, Lur dark-haired main character proceeded to give her the most random name known to man. He called her Street since he had picked her up from the street, so that she would never forget where she came from. It was such a lousy name that it would be better for future generations if he never gave anyone another name again. However, the poor girl was so bottom-rung in demon society that she was overjoyed about getting such a rubbish name. With joy, she thanked the prince for naming her. Since he had sort of officially claimed her for his own use, he then instructed Hatchi tell him everything that she knew about the human world. The girl leapt into obedience immediately. Meanwhile, the young Cheyenne was running as fast as he could to find his friend. He was worried about Minho being in danger, and he groaned that he should have kept refusing those wicked people until the end. Now his friend was in trouble. The poor boy had thought that he had hit a jackpot when he had participated in a contest and had somehow won the challenge for creating an app. However, he ended up being picked up by a group of very shady-looking people who had heard that the prize money was just a measly 50 million. The boy clutched his winnings close to his chest, staring in fear at the people before him. They called him a precious asset now, and immediately, the goons were instructed to drag the poor boy into the car. The boy had screamed in fear, losing the flowers he had won. From then on, his life had been hell. He had met the redhead leader who had asked the key what he was shaking for. They were just doing a simple business transaction after all. Right beside him was 50 million won in cash, and all he had to do was hand over the app that he had made. The poor boy shook and said that he had not created this app to sell it. The big boss fell silent as he considered this answer. Then he told the kid that it was just an assumption. The poor boy shook because, truly, he could not stand his ground. He had no money to fight such terrible-looking people. Now, he was running with all of his might to save his friend Minho from them. He had to get there fast to make sure that his friend would not meet the terrible Jin Hei. As the boy ran, he accidentally bumped into an actually terrifying-looking guy. This dude was absolutely scary because he was familiar. The man even commented on how they did not even have to go looking for the kid. The boy was terrified because Jae-hee had found him instantly, and the wicked tattoo artist promised the kid that he was finished now. This was the time that he would surely meet his end. There was a grunt of pain which did not signal any good thing for our friend Lim Shan. From now on he was sentenced to a life of managing the app in a guarded room. If he did not want to be locked up for the rest of his life, it would be in his best interest to do it correctly. The boy yelled and tried to make them stop. Getting kidnapped was not exactly part of how he expected his life to go. Jae-hee was not hearing it though. His life was on the line after all. He informed the young boy that they would be watching his every move from outside, so he had better not get any funny ideas. The boy begged for them to stop, but it was too late. Plus they even left a guard inside to monitor him as he worked beside a giant computer. The poor kid closed his eyes, cursing his terrible fate. Outside, Jae-hee's goons curiously asked if that kid was really a developer. The boy looked like a total pushover after all. However, the artist knew that pushover geniuses were the best. They just needed what he built so that they could distribute the blue ribbon. The app he made was called I'm Here, and they wondered how a strange-sounding app like that was supposed to be a distribution channel. Even the name sounded like trash, just like the kid who made it. However, the corny-sounding name was necessary for the distribution's success. Even the logo of the app was friendly and warm, with a mix of blue and pink ribbons. The redhead showed up then. The big boss himself had come into town, and he asked if everything was ready. That thing that Lim Shan had made was the core of the blue ribbon project after all, so they had to make sure that everything was going well. Once they had the buyer's data in their hands, they would be able to manipulate the market however they wanted. The real-time location sharing feature would also quickly become their primary weapon for expanding the business. This made the goon visibly excited to hear that they would soon start selling the blue ribbon for real. The demonic-looking redhead glanced down at the sweet in his hand, mumbling a half-hearted confirmation. It was now time for them to show this drug to the world. This was the boss's decree, and he smiled a malicious smile. Choi Yuri was called and told to sign up for something and to add another person as a friend. Already, the app was making its rounds. It was marketed as an app that gave a cash app if they accepted the friend request. It was 30,000 won per person. The girls were shocked to hear such news about how to make such easy money. They would even get 100,000 if they just added 3 people. This got the other people excited, and the girls hurried to get their friends to take part. Even in a class of idiots, there would always be one who adhered to caution, and she had to ask what this app was even for. The oppressive force of the group did not even care as long as she got money, and she told the sensitive girl to just obey and sign up. There was even an event for signing up, and they gasped in awe at the very dangerous drug that was being marketed as diet pills, proof that young people would really buy anything. They were offering these diet pills for free, of course, and they dared to lie that the health functional food was certified by the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety. The girls cooed because they found the name of the drug to be very pretty. In just a day, their numbers had skyrocketed thanks to all their lies and the power of trends. The little gang was amazed by how many people were joining their app. It was as expected of boss Youngmoo. Still, Jae-hee was kind of pissed that her goons had not caught the monkey that trashed his shop. The goons admitted that they had checked the CCTV in the hope of placing a face. Unfortunately, for a reason that they could not understand, they had been interrupted by a bat. Despite how weird it sounded, the goons had gone into the security room, and a big bat had been hovering there, staring right at the camera. They had gone round to check the other cameras, but they had an even weirder interruption, like a rat that was plastered to the CCTV. None of this made any sense to the tattoo artist, and truly, the main character had been right about that monitoring spirit being so bad at acting casual. The big main goon checked his phone, and then he called the artist's attention. No matter how heated he was, they had other things to attend to, and it was time to go. The blue ribbon stock had just arrived, and they had to go deal with that. The sun continued to set over the scene of the beautiful city, and our dude was on the move again. He was pretty, exceptional, and glaring down at the latest thing to catch his attention. He asked what street his unfortunately named familiar was up to, and the poor cat first apologized for putting on a bit of weight lately. The boy could not care less about that. He wanted to know what was up with the investigation that he had directed yesterday. It was by no means an easy task, but he finally figured it out. Flashback to then. The main character had knocked down the blonde and troublesome character, and he remembered picking up the odd package blue product that had fallen from the blonde's hold. A quick sniff immediately informed the dude that it was definitely the scent of the gnawing flower. So humans had been consuming this nonsense so that they could awaken their ungodly powers. It was impossible to cultivate the gnawing flower without a host, and our dude wondered how they had been able to get their hands on a flower that was wiped out even in the demon realm. So his little spy had come back with some vital information on that candy that he told her to stalk called the blue ribbon. Apparently it was spreading among humans in various forms as diet pills or supplements in disguise. The boy asked about the raw materials, and apparently, the blue ribbon was being manufactured so secretly that it was difficult to track down the source of the material. Obviously, the prince was not so pleased about this lack of any form of concrete information. He needed something that was actually useful, not air that led to nowhere. The spy got nervous, but she also got useful aid away. It turned out that the finished product was currently spreading rapidly. Since the volume was so darn massive, if they followed the concentrated traces of demonic energy, they would be sure to find the manufacturer. Now that was the kind of information that our bro liked to hear. However, if the little rat had already figured it out, then she would have gone there already to scope out the area. There was no way she expected him to do her work for her. The little thing whined that the Master Bambi had told her to only go accompanied by the demon prince. How dare that little jerk try to dictate his movements from hell? Now he wanted to know if this little double-faced spy was busy reporting his movements to Bambi as well. Well, she was originally the blonde spy. The poor thing apologized to Master Lavis, but she was just a lowly creature following both their orders, a command whore that just obeyed whatever big and powerful bully that was pushing her around. Well, Lavis was not having that. It was time for Street to pick a master immediately. She could only serve one, and she had to decide who it would be. It was either him or the blondie jerk that kept commanding her from the depths of the underworld. The little bluinette struggled to make a decision on the spot, tears in her eyes as she tried to think of the best answer that would not rock the boat. However, the demon prince was going to make the choice easy for her because he layered in some heavy amounts of intimidating and dark ladder, saying that if she went with him, then he would make sure that she would no longer be a lowly creature. After all, he had done her a favor by giving her a name. At this point, she owed him a favor. The girl stared in awe at her master, thinking in amazement of the kind of clever and sexy demon that she could become under his tutelage. The portrait was very enticing, and she gasped in excitement. If that was the case, her forehead kissed the ground, and she happily pledged her blood and flesh to the great darkness of the Prince Lavis. The boy felt very satisfied, smirking rather demonically, and he lifted his hand to pat her head. He, Lavis Vindica, would now take the little maiden as his personal subordinate. Something seemed to fly out of her head, and it looked like Bambi's control over her. Now that the dark-haired prince had established dominance, the kitty was truly his now. Now that he had permanently gotten rid of Bambi's control, the prince announced to his new pet that they would now head out to the location where the blue ribbon was being gathered. Immediately, she hopped to it, and the sky continued to darken into the evening. They arrived at an odd-looking place in the woods that seemed to act as a makeshift warehouse with a lot of large tanker boxes. This was apparently the area where the demonic energy of the blue ribbon was concentrated. Now that they were here, the prince was interested in one-upping. However, The kitty paused because there was a seriously tight lock around the boxes. It was held closed with heavy chains as well. The prince just told the weakling to move and raised his fist. With a swing of his hand, the chains fell apart, and the kitten stared in awe as the box definitely creaked open. Both stiffened as the doors opened, and their sensitive demon noses were hit with a thick scent of something absolutely nasty. It was enough to make them want to barf. Inside the box were dozens and dozens of sealed boxes. Every single one of them was a product made from the blue ribbon plant. The prince stiffened in horror. He could not believe just how many of these things were available. In the realm of the demons, a loud and hearty laughter rang through the mountains and the valleys. It was Lavis' uncle, and he seemed involved in a very serious sparring match against his dear sweet nephew. No matter how hard the little demon fought, the bigger demon laughed that the boy was still far too weak. The little boy snarled in anger, growling that his uncle was disgusting and vulgar. The bigger shameless demon just laughed that if his nephew was not going to have the decency to be cute, then he should just hurry up and die. The requirement for some uncle loving was apparently some cuteness. However, the little kid had no intention of dying, and he raised his arm to block that ferocious blow. He managed to use his elbow to slow down the intensity of his uncle's punch. The purple-haired demon was rather proud of him. However, Lavis was still a kid, and soon the poor boy found himself screaming as he got tossed down the side of a cliff. He had fallen, cursing his uncle the entire time. The boy really did not know the first thing about being cute. The purple-haired demon laughed as he watched his descent, asking his cute nephew if he really had plans to die like that. Child raising in the demon world was truly unconventional still. The bigger demon had the decency to hop and skip down the cliff to join his nephew. Many stones fell from the top like rain as he skipped on down, and the poor kid had actually hit the ground at a really awkward angle. The poor kid groaned and shook in pain, but his uncle was not even sparing him a second to recover. Like a haunting nightmare, his uncle landed by his side and teasingly asked his nephew if he was dead just yet. The boy glared, but they paused when they scented something off. There were gnawing flowers at the bottom of the pit, loads and loads of bodies on the floor with flowers sprouting out of them. So, this was where they had all been hiding, a terrifying breed of plants that were deadly to whatever they touched, and the starting point of their decay always seemed to be the eyes. The young prince stared in shock at the pile of bodies on the floor, and his eyes widened the more that he understood what he was looking at. When darkness and light were sundered, and when incompatible beings were created to oppose one another, unable to merge with any color, that was the place where these sickening entities thrived. Humans had discovered them at some point, staring down at the flower that bloomed in the beginning, where they had gathered. Those wicked flowers that turned even the most beautiful soul into an ugly disaster would devour the discarded celestials and ton demon. The deepest desire of that gnawing flower was, of course, the annihilation of the world. What a wicked but beautiful creature. The entire pile of them had been burned by the boy's uncle immediately, mercilessly ending their wicked and terrible reign. Those flowers would never get the chance to leave the pit, and the purple-haired demon smiled with pride while his young nephew looked on at the flame. Now here he was in the human world, once again confronting the awful beings that were those flowers. They certainly should have all been incinerated back then, but it seemed that the demonic found a way to grow no matter what. The little spy covered her nose as she agreed. The Lord Demon King had scarred the demon realm and wiped them out completely. At least, that was how the story went. However, if that is true, then there should be no reason for such a massive stockpile of the product that is being distributed now. That flower had actually first appeared in the human realm, and this place was a middle ground where the chaos of the light and darkness often mixed. The human realm belonged to neither side after all, yet they were capable of leading either, letting light or darkness into their lives. According to human history, the boy had been taught that humans also eradicated them thousands of years ago. However, looking at this, if they had appeared in both worlds simultaneously, then someone must have orchestrated it. The cat nodded and agreed. It was likely that she had no idea what was going on, but she was going to keep agreeing with her new boss. Suddenly, a flashlight came on in the area, and the cat winced when the light was shown on both her and the prince. It seemed some of the gang members had shown up. They had been wondering where those voices were coming from, and they asked the two if they had any idea where they had crawled into. Suddenly, they instantly recognized the boy as the jerk who had come into the tattoo shop and had then beaten up everyone. The cat immediately pointed out that the woman was Jin Jae-hee. It turned out that Jae-hee was actually a girl after all and not an obscenely pretty boy. The young prince had been looking for her. The little tattoo artist glared at them and asked how dare they wreck her tattoo shop like that. She did not even know how they had found out about this place. However, the young prince had more important questions. First, he asked if Jin Jae-hee was the idiot managing this dumpster fire. They thought that he talked rather funny. Clearly, he was not using typical street speak, but they could still communicate. Yeah, she was the one in charge, and she wondered what he was going to do about this. Then, Lavis asked if she was aware of the raw materials used to make these demonic goods. The girl laughed, giggling at his choice of words. Raw material was a real hoot, and she asked if the boy was trying to steal their precious trade secrets right now. The boy sighed since it was not like it was strictly his business. Really, But leaving things alone like this would really leave a bad taste in his mouth. So, he could not let this nonsense slide. The girl was thinking the same thing. They knew darn well what Youngmu would do to them if they messed up, so they had no intention of letting a stranger talk them out of the bad thing that they were already doing. The girl spread her arms and declared that this was a special distribution. She pulled out some of that sickening blue stuff and handed it to the goons who stood around her. They were the lower-class thugs, not like the ones she usually worked with. Excited, they asked if it was really okay to take that stuff for free. Well, they were using it to protect their property, so she could let it slide this time. They should shut up and eat it immediately. Those idiots snatched the treat that she offered, devouring it like a pack of hungry lions. As they were doing this, the prince informed Street that with her current magic power, she would only get in the way. The cat got the memo to just stay hidden and dipped. Now all those losers were hitting their high-class transformation into even bigger piles of duty. They had smoke spitting out of their mouths, and Jae-hee smirked, pointing at the dude and telling her newly forged monsters to stomp the heck out of that dude. They tossed their wrapped immediately and raced right at their target like a gang of angry apes. The dark-haired boy watched the approach of a group of arrogant fools who were clearly drowning in their ignorance, unaware of the sick power that intoxicated them. They might as well come forward since this area was already overflowing with demonic energy. Come they did, and the first guy threw a wide punch that did not land. That was not a punch. Actually, that dude was armed with a dagger. Getting pumped on demonic steroids and then using a pointy weapon was definitely a different level of cheating. No matter how low they sank, they were not getting a drop on Lavis though. The boy whipped out the Karat Chop special and diced up those amateurs with a few quick blows here and there. In fact, he even threw in a kick for good measure because they had to drop their level of disrespect. Now we can't forget that these enemies are evil charged and they are coming in one after the other, so the boy could not drop his guard. He fought hard, dodging their attacks and using the force of their lunges against them, so that those idiots would end up taking a punch to the face. Then he whirled around just in time to get jumped by some dude who did not respect personal space. That little Lek was hugging onto his midsection like it was going to rain gold. That was tough, and the demon prince was having none of it. Unfortunately, that evil rat was the first to land an actual hit on him, and he got thrown to the ground. Getting his school uniform dirty was really annoying, even more annoying when that jerk tried to knee him in the face. Fool Lavis once, and it was a shame on him, but he was not about to let these losers fool him twice. Within seconds, he had grabbed the offending knee. His kitten had been watching the whole exchange with great worry and fear, but Jae-hee was, of course, having the time of her life watching someone get beaten up. All of her mad and wild dogs were happily doing her bidding and spreading pain through a single target. Of course, she was pleased. Lavis had to keep up with 4 enemies at once. This whole vigilante thing was really not for a demon trapped in a human body. It was very inconvenient to have to fight cheaters using steroids. They had ingested a larger dose than last time too, so they were causing him serious trouble. In that case, the boy dipped and ran into the big box of illegal goods. He stuffed his hand into one of the boxed and grabbed hold of a packet of something. It almost seemed like Lice was going to indulge in the drug too, but instead, when he pulled his hand out, he tossed the big powder of purple substance right at his attackers. Those monsters coughed and hacked as the rancid smell took over their right senses. It seemed that the drug had a completely different effect when it was not provided in its finished product. They hacked and coughed, and even the prince had to admit that he did not appreciate that disgusting, vulgar stench. However, his demonic energy immediately reacted to such a vile thing in the air, and his strength was able to spike. Now that there was spreading evil, his demonic blood got pumping and ready for action. The other dudes were still fighting to catch their breath, but it was time for the main character to take advantage of their disorientation. Instantly, he smashed his powered-up hand into the face of the one who had landed the hit on him. That ot came crashing down, but Lavis did not stop there. His fairy fist of justice doubled in power, and he knocked the brakes right off that dude. The second dude tried to retaliate with a kick, proving that he just did not know when to stay down. That was all well and good because the prince was going to teach that naughty little leg a lesson. He tossed that idiot to the ground, smashing him into the floor like he was glass. He then went the extra mile and stomped that leg out of functionality. The demon prince was really pissed, and he was just getting started. With 2 idiots down, the big idiot remained, screaming out curses and yelling for the main character to die. That was rich because the dark-haired boy had no intention of dying so early. He smacked that dude really good and sent him soaring. However, that guy was not allowed to hit the ground just yet, not until Lace hefted him up and then tossed him like a sumo wrestler. Big guys won big and stud ugly prizes. Now Jae-hee was no longer smiling. She had no idea that they had signed up to fight the devil for whatever ugly reason. She had no idea how that kid had been able to beat the whole team all by himself. As it just so happened, our boy was still leaking demonic energy, and of course, he had a new target that was currently shaking in her boots. The aura that he was letting out was absolutely frightening, and the dark shadows that amassed behind him looked like the making of a horrifying elven monster. The girl shook and trembled as she stared in horror at what she was seeing. The boy that they were facing was like a ghost or maybe even something worse. At the 5th SC Concours, the ballerina on the stage took a bow, as she stood on the stage in a frilly, cute little outfit. Then Yuri was called in. She was Kang Haeon-ja's daughter, and with her skills, they could have easily joined the Venus Ballet Company. Just then, the redhead barged in to greet their very important customer. The woman yelled and asked who on earth these guys were. They had no idea where they were, and they should not dare to barge into this place when they were a bunch of thugs. They also had a pile of that special diet drug that they were selling to people. The redhead and his team chuckled at being called thugs, and they apologized for their rude entrance. However, they had just come in person to deliver a bulk order of blue ribbon. The lady stared in shock at the drugs dropped before her. It was a bright blue color, sealed in a jar, and the whole thing had a foreboding air. The lady's eyes were wide in horror as she stared at the medicine in front of her. The redhead said that she had no reason to look so flustered. They handled everything from manufacturing to sales themselves, so she had nothing to worry about. The woman was still hesitant. She had not expected the diet pills that she ordered to be brought in by a bunch of dudes who looked like they worked in the crime industry as the actual criminals. She needed to know if consuming this was safe. The redhead chuckled that she was asking this question at this point in time. She had already fed plenty of it to her daughter before sending her out to dance. They could see her twirling around on television right now. The girl was moving with some demonic brilliance because she was higher than the Eiffel Tower and bursting with inhumane strength thanks to those pills from the underworld. The girl stared in shock as she watched her daughter, Yuri, compete, and the girl continued to dance, frothing coming from her lips as she spun, veins popping all over her body. Her body responded to practiced movements, but things were looking dangerous, and the lead thug sighed rather mournfully. He joked that the girl must have been in a rush, and he asked just how many of those pills the woman had fed her little girl, because things were not looking good. The girl was dancing as expected, but with the most haunted expression on her face as her body twisted to unnatural degrees. The mother yelled for her daughter in horror, trying to make the dancer stop, but of course, the girl on TV could not hear her as she continued to bend her body out of shape. Suddenly, the girl just collapsed on the stage and the people watching screamed in horror. They gasped, wondering what was going on, most of the audience going pale at what they had seen. It was clear that something had gone wrong with the girl, and some of the security approached to help her off stage. The mother shook as she saw what had become of her precious child, tears gathering in her eyes, and she cursed at the thugs who had dared to sell her those awful diet pills. She yelled that they had promised no side effects. She had trusted a bunch of strangers that she only knew online. Of course, the redhead smirked and said that the lack of side effects only applies when they stuck to the recommended dosage. At any rate, now her precious daughter was in a very difficult situation. The poor thing was twisted up and teeming on the floor, and it looked like there was no hope for her now. The mother would just have to satisfy the girl with fake desires just to keep her alive. Even in this terrible situation, they were still offering those sickening and lurid, awful drugs in hopes of creating a change in society. The mother squeaked in alarm, but the redhead just laughed. Now her precious danger would not be able to live a single day without a blue ribbon, and as their VIP customer, she had to keep buying their product. The mother was busy having a mental breakdown about the situation. She had spent so much money on her daughter after all. She had worked hard to get the dancer into the top position and health, so that they could achieve their dreams together. As the woman broke down, the vain youth smirked at her despair. Suddenly, he got a call from Jin Jae-hee, right? That was the lady responsible for monitoring his favorite app, Goose, that laid the golden eggs, so it was not really a call that he could ignore. With a sigh, the boy picked up what was apparently a video call and asked what was going down now. First, the girl tried to apologize to Yangmu. This was likely not what he wanted to hear right now, but they had a situation. The dark-haired Mina character then butt his head into the frame. He wanted to take a good look at the monitor responsible for making the blue ribbon. Yangmu stared down at the demon prince with massive offense on his face, asking who the heck he was speaking to. The demon prince smiled because he could recognize that aura right from the phone. Well, that was great, because Lavis wanted to meet up with the redhead for just a second. The call ended, and the redhead took a deep breath. He informed their kind VIP customer that something urgent had just come up. Later that evening, the meetup was going down in a nice foresty area where all of the drugs were stored. Our dude was waiting with his cat, Jae-hee, and his cat asked why he thought that humans did drugs. She guessed that it was because they were stupid and arrogant. Even when they took drugs, they were so darn overconfident that they would not get addicted. They would indulge in such reckless depravity, and then fall into a very sickening trap. They did this because they had nothing to believe in. That was why they clung to something so small, so dangerous too. Some movement caught the kitten's attention, and the Lord Lavis turned. It seemed the King Yangmu had made it to the location. The boy had moved rocket fast. Now the redhead had shown up, and seeing the discarded bodies of the goons on the floor, he could easily guess that this was also the dude who had been responsible for the tattoo shop incident. Since that was the case, Then they could hurry up and cut to the chase by asking why this dark-haired dude was looking for him. The boy scoffed and said that he had no interest in human trash like him, he had more important questions, like where they had gotten this supply of disgusting and stinky purple powder. It should be hard for a mere human to acquire. The redhead stared in shock at the language that this dark-haired boy was using. Just now, he had called him a mere human. Yeongmu knew this was bad news if that guy was who he thought he was. Now we get an epic flashback as the redhead remembers a time when all sorts of junk were lying on the floor. He had kicked his dad and complained that he needed more meds. No matter how much he kicked his decaying dad, he did not get any answer. The more he stared at the shriveled up person before him, the more he slowly realized that his dad was never getting up. Drug abuse was such a sad thing, with how much it stole from people. The boy's parental figure had lived his whole life as a junkie, and now he had died as one too. It was very likely that his son would die following the same path. The boy screamed and yelled that now that his dad was dead, there was no one to get him the drugs that he wanted. He beat on his dad's corpse like a madman. Perhaps he already was a madman. He needed his drugs, but he was underage, and he had no money. There was no way for him to buy them, and he screamed as he punched at his dad in rage. Suddenly, his dad's eyes flashed purple, and the boy froze in shock and fear. He could not believe it when that old shriveled corpse sat up slowly as his dad had come to life. The demonic aura in the body took a little look at the area around him, chuckling and asking if the man's death was sorrowful in any way. The redhead stared in shock at the demon, and it lurched forward with a leer. If the boy's sorrow desired it, he could return this man to him. The redhead just laughed like a mad person. He did not feel sorrow. In fact, the kid was happy that his stupid dad had died. He did not need trash like a dad. The boy screamed that her just needed some darn drugs. The demon was not too bothered by this wild behavior. If drugs were all that the kid needed, then all her had to do was feed his father's corpse to the gnawing glower, and he would get all of the drugs that he needed. There was actually a demon passing around that flower to human. With that, a covenant with the boy and the demon would be established, and the kid would obtain what he desperately desired, which was drugs. The boy stared in awe at the flower. Then the demon added that if anyone deceived his loyalty, or denied the gnawing glower, then the redhead could go ahead and kill them. This covenant would protect the human who established it. The boy stared emotively at the flower for a bit, eyes focused on it like he was staring at a weird creature from space. Slowly, that blank look stretched into a wicked smile, and the boy gleefully took that flower and planted it right inside of his dad. He was truly a very wicked creature, and blood splattered all over the room as the covenant was formed. Now, in the present, the redhead was offended. He could not believe that this boy and a stranger had called him a mere human. The dark-haired demon hummed, saying that he must have something to believe in. The redhead did indeed have something like that. That person had given him a new life. Just as the demon prince had thought, he had made a contract with a demon. Now, the dark-haired main character smirked, saying that he did not know what kind of trash that the bro believed in, but both that rotten demon and the redhead were a pity. The more that Yeongmu heard, the madder he became. This insignificant little rat was here insulting his lord and savior. Immediately, the demonic head of the gang ordered that his goons should drag that little punk over to him immediately. Well, they rushed to do as they were told, like they feared their deaths if they failed. Immediately, the cat took off because she could already tell that she was no match for whatever madness was going on around her. This back and forth situation with fighting low-effort goons was really boring Lavis. This was a serious situation here, and he wanted to clean up this filthy mess as soon as possible. So, the fight began. A vehicle went barreling down the street, and the poor, rich woman had no choice but to buy more of those terrible drugs as she rushed her precious child to the hospital. Now that they had gotten a good number of people addicted to that stuff, orders were now skyrocketing since the drug had launched. Blue Ribbon was totally hitting the jackpot, and they were increasing very important customers nationwide, which would be a piece of cake at this rate. In fact, the company was already preparing to become some kind of global enterprise. There were already a few cases of unfortunate fools who had passed out from the overdose. Their brother Yeongmu had already opened up routes in China and Japan. They believed so strongly in their big brother Yeongmu, believing that with him, anything was possible. Meanwhile, the kid who was responsible for this app was hearing every word and hating his life. Thanks to his creation, the drugs were spreading fast. The boy begged for this situation to stop fast, begging for someone to save him. Fortunately, it seemed a hero had hurt him, a demonic hero of course. The scared Jaehee begged for her boss to see how easily that kid had taken down the guards. He was not a normal person. In fact, there was a chance that he was not even human. Lavis just sighed and turned to the redhead in question. He had staged this whole thing so that he could meet Yeongmu, so the arrogant human should not keep him waiting. The redhead was silent, the covenant that he had made pulsing through his veins. He recalled that if any denied the power of the flower, he was instructed to annihilate them, with this order pumping through him. The dude pulled out the drugs in his hands, recalling his promise to do as the demon said. He tossed the drugs in his mouth, chomping in the name of the Lord Bauer Hilt. If any was to appear who denied the gnawing flower, the evil redhead had been instructed that person should immediately be put to death. Taking the blue pills into his hand, the boy's veins, heart and soul pumped with the drive to fulfill his master's commands. That demon had lifted him from the darkest pits of hell, and he would now follow Boer Hilt to the deepest depths of despair. He was still yelling and pointing out that the boy they faced was no ordinary high schooler. Any idiot with a brain would be able to tell that there were many things wrong with the kid. He in fact just might be with the kids that was making that new drug. Now this was curious, and Lavis immediately asked what drug the girl was talking about. He had come to stop the production of one drug just to hear that there was another being made. That was rather annoying. However, the conversation was going to have to be put on hold because the fierce, raging youth had appeared behind him. Instantly, the boy moved, turning slowly as he saw that punch coming right for his face. He managed to dodge the punch that followed with his arm, but the redhead was not slowing down. Punch after punch was thrown at the main character, numerous hits attempting to damage his body and break his spirit. The opponent was fast and he was clearly on a different level from the previous guys. Still, Lavis was able to persist and continued to block Yongmu's attacks to the point that he asked how this was possible. The redhead suspected that this kid had also received the blessings from the demon lord. The redhead, however, was not accepting that. The Lord Hilt was his god and he had no intentions of sharing. He was going to be selfish until the end and hog onto this power that was his and his alone. The dude was a real piece of work, but now the prince could understand the gnawing flower and this disgusting smell. The god that the redhead believed in was clearly Boer Hilt. The redhead could not believe it, even though he had not mentioned it. This opponent knew the name of his god. The redhead growled, shaking with an anger that only heightened when the main character outright laughed at him. Lavis called the gang leader an idiot for picking such a pathetic loser as his god. Truly, no one around had any form of standard. It was rather pitiful to watch. The redhead yelled that our guy had no right to insult the one who had taken pity on him. The dark-haired boy just chuckled more. The demon Hilt must have pitied the pathetic human. In fact, the main character guessed that his opponent must have looked so pathetic that he sought him out, even while hiding and running away himself. The redhead screamed in rage, his face distorted in anger as he yelled that a wretch like Lavis had no place speaking about his previous god. He fired out even more attacks, even more rapid punches, attacking as his life depended on it, as he tossed blow after blow at the steadfast teenager who blocked every attack. Boer Hilt, that demon, had truly moved up in the world. Back in the demon realm, when the prince had so recklessly slaughtered every member of the Hilt clan, and their pathetic little bodies flying and their little heads rolling, back then, that demon had taken the opportunity of Lava's distraction to flee. The cowardly wimp had run away alone, and now he had come to Earth and was being treated like a king. Such a thing was much too disgusting to the demon prince to think that people would actually worship the kind of wimp, too scared to do anything but run from him. Now he needed to know where his former enemy was hiding right now. The redhead yelled and cursed, saying that the dark-haired boy had no right to talk about his lord and savior. He got even more pumped, demonic energy flooded through his blood and body, and the prince had to balk at the awful strength because it was getting even worse. Like, really, everything was even more disgusting now. Yongmu didn't care, he was raging and raving, yelling that anyone who would dare to insult Boer would surely be killed by his own hands. Throwing himself at the dark-haired boy, he made to crush his head in between his hands, determined to end his life. He managed to grab the prince in a headlock and then shot out with his knee at the prince's midsection, landing the first actual hit on the kid since he had started fighting that night. In his enraged form, Yongmu was able to grab our dude and throw him, slamming him right to the floor, and of course, raising his fist to deliver a surefire, painful blow. That tomato head was moving like a jealous lover the way he was pounding our dude into the ground. He wanted possession of absolutely everything, the blue ribbon and the evil Lord Boer. The boy declared that all of it was his, and he was ready to go mad protecting his filthy, stinky-ass leader. The dark-haired boy groaned, seeing that this dude who had seemed cool before had now completely lost his reason to the demonic energy. It was a real pity to see the dude so far gone. The dude really intended to kill him too. The penalty for killing a human really sucked. But our dude had to keep in mind that he could not kill this dude no matter how much he annoyed him. The redhead sure made it tempting though, with the way he was roaring and growling like a wild animal, while continuously punching down on the dark-haired teenager like he was nothing more than a workout bag. The terrified cat watched the whole thing go down with fear in her eyes, worried about her lord and master. The prince was reaching his limit with that restrictive human body. If only this were the demon realm, then surely everything would be much better. The girl wished that she could use his abilities to aid him in some way. The onslaught of punches continued, rapid fire like a machine gun that delivered nothing but blow after blow. As the boy's madness continued, so did the pain that he brought the prince, though the main character kept his guard up, valiantly blocking every hit that came at him. It seemed the test subject for the knowing flower had completely fused. The onlookers from the demon world watched the exchange rather curiously. Even if Lavis was a human body, since he had the demonic bloodstone embedded, Bambi had thought that the boy would be able to suppress a mere test subject. It seemed that they had overestimated the prince, and he might genuinely die this time. In that case, the boy's soul would be annihilated forever. Of course, the uncle was involved in this viewing, and he laughed rather heartily at this display, asking the blonded demon if he was aware of the thing that Lavis hated the most. It was a rather curious question, and the blonde thought about it for a second. As far as he knew, the prince hated pretty much everything, so picking just one thing was rather difficult. The prince's temper was rather nasty after all, but the blonde could already guess who he took after. The uncle chucked and told the blonde not to curse with his face when he could see everything. The blonde sighed and looked away, but the uncle grinned. The thing that the young lad hated most in the world was filth. This was surprising to the blonde, but the uncle just grinned and informed him that his dear sweet nephew was a misophobe. He absolutely could not stand anything that he thought of as dirt, and as they watched that rain of punches come down, a hand reached out and grabbed that flying punch. That filthy, disgusting redhead who was spitting all over him was dirty. The redhead growled in rage, shaking with intense anger. The dark-haired boy could not stand it anymore. That filthy smell that was coming from Yangmu was downright repulsive, and he was barely fighting back the urge to throw up. The prince had no intention of enduring that disgusting stench any longer. His grip tightened on that dirty fist, twisting and clenching down hard on that hold until the redhead gasped and jumped back in pain. He could not understand this sudden retaliation from a foe that he had been working really hard to beat. Even if it was just his left hand, the prince stared in awe at it. The strength that he had felt just now was like his old power and had come flooding back into his veins. Now that was the kind of feeling that filled him with strength, and the growling wild animal before him hissed at him. In truth, Lavis had no desire to touch the creature's dirty, stinking body. It filled him with such disgust that his hand flamed up and he flew right at the little rat, deciding to end this nonsense dance as soon as possible. He smacked that boy so hard that his opponent's head shook like it was a little bobblehead doll. The redhead rocked up, growling and wondering how a human could possibly hit him so hard with so much power. Street was absolutely overjoyed as she watched the battle. Not only was her master back on his feet, but he also seemed to have regained a bit of that awesome power of his. At this point, Lavis was thrumming with so much power that the reflection of his demonic self hovered over Minho's body, and he growled in disgust at being called human of all things. That earned that trash-talking redhead a second earth, shattering punch to the face, and he got hit so hard that he flew across the yard. His female lackey squeaked in fear, terrified that she would ever find a kid who was able to trash her boss like he was a child. Lavis scoffed and told the pathetic gang leader to stop blabbering with that smell-why mouth of his. He reeked of that stupid flower and of his even weaker boss. He slapped and smacked that guy around like he was pest control and the opponent no more than an annoying bug that he had to kill. From hell. His blonde friend watched in fascination at the sudden boost of power that the prince had gotten. The uncle beamed because his nephew had not proven him wrong. The prince must have had a headache from the stench after that test subject awakened. It must have been really hard to get close because of the smell. That was because the precious prince hated filth more than anything. When his misophobia was overly stimulated, it led to an awakening in the boy, letting him use a portion of his real and true power. Now the blonde stared in awe at the older demon, asking if the prince could somehow use his old power even in a human body. It would probably come with a few physical repercussions, but the blonde was in awe. Even with the demonic bloodstone, it should be impossible for the sinner's body to fully wield the power of the demon realm. The uncle beamed with pride, saying that the situation was that Lavis was no ordinary guy. No matter what anyone said, the prince was and would always be the kind of mad demon that took after his uncle. Relentlessly, the prince pounded that idiot into the floor. He was a foolish creature, and the redhead should consider himself lucky that the dark-haired boy was not allowed to commit murder with this body. If not, he would have torn that idiot's head from his shoulders. The raging lunatic stared in confusion, unable to compute how this teenager had beaten him so badly. He who had received a direct blessing from Bawar. The boy touched on the powder before him, and of course, he immediately got thrilled when he recalled that he had all of that demonic drug ready for his consumption. He planned on getting high some more and becoming a true menace. However, Lavis warned the rat not to get any funny ideas. He would have to finish the redhead without killing him. The prince launched his attack, rearing back like a catapult and then shooting forward in a way that had the youth's eyes widening in horror. Lavis came in like a bomb, and his opponent was unable to flee. Red's face got smashed in, all while the Prince of Hell held back his full power. He pulled back, and there was the boy hanging from the box with his mouth agape, like an abandoned carcass. Now that the stupid boy was defeated, the prince gasped in relief. Now that the stench was finally fading a bit, and he could cover his nose with his handkerchief in peace.